It's time for a change. Marc Molinaro has a real plan to fix New York.
Just what is that plan? This morning, get the answer from the Republican candidate for governor, Marc Molinaro. Can he overcome a dwindling war chest and other obstacles to defeat a popular Democrat seeking a third term in a very blue state?
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. He is behind in the polls and low in finances, but Marc Molinaro still feels confident he has a shot of becoming the first Republican to be elected governor of New York since George Pataki won a third term 16 years ago. You could say he's got politics in his blood. First elected to public office at the age of 18. A year later, at the age of 19, he became the youngest mayor in America, taking the helm of the upstate village of Tivoli. Marc is currently serving his second term as Dutchess County Executive. Good to have you on Pix 11 News Close-Up, and we want to hear all of your plans. You know, every politician always has a very bold agenda. Yours is very bold and resonates with voters. You want to lower property taxes, one of the highest tax states in the country. You want to eliminate the fare increases for the MTA. You want to remove the cloud of corruption in Albany. It's quite an ambitious agenda, Marc.
Yeah. Listen, I figure that I have one opportunity, and New York has one chance to finally get this right. Quite frankly, we are now the highest tax state in America. We have the highest property taxes in America. In the last 8 years, we've seen the decline of the transit system here in New York City and on Long Island, and corruption has overtaken the state capitol. And quite frankly, after 12 years now of the governor serving in statewide office, we haven't seen the kind of relief that taxpayers deserve and the fixes that we deserve here in the city in mass transit and otherwise. So I have got, as you mentioned, years of experience. I know that we can achieve this. I know we can cut property taxes 30% over 5 years. I know if we get the politics and the corruption out, we can fix the MTA and make it responsive to people. And I know that we can grow the economy and make life easier for New Yorkers who struggle too hard. I know it's achievable.
So you know, but the voters don't. So tell them how you plan to do it.
Well, listen, first, New York forces more of its spending down onto local property taxpayers than any place else in the country. So take responsibility for the expense. My granddad used to have a saying, Joe Biden says it too, don't tell me what you believe in, show me your budget. Well, New York offloads its expense and hides that, and because of it, property taxes are so astronomically high. I want to be responsible for driving down cost, making government more efficient. As it relates to the transit system here in the city, nobody wants ownership. I mean, the governor's been playing this game of footsie with the mayor. I want to own the problem. New York State is responsible for the subway system and for mass transit in the city and in Hudson Valley and Long Island. We have to hold the MTA accountable and fix the system. You start by leading and really investing in fixing the problem instead of blaming others for the problem.
I want to get to your plans for the transit in a moment, but let's continue on the property taxes because, of course, voters would love to see a 30% reduction.
Yeah.
So if you're going to cut taxes like that, what are you going to do to make up for the shortfall? How are you going to pay for it?
Do exactly what I did as a county executive, make government effective. I mean, for instance, we have one of the largest Medicaid system, well, actually, largest Medicaid program in the country, but there are people living in generational poverty who feel left out, and rightfully so. I grew up on food stamps. I know the way this system is supposed to work, and I can tell you that my mom struggled really hard and was demoralized by a government system that too often seems rigged against people. By taking responsibility for state spending, like Medicaid, and making the system humane and compassionate and helping people find their way to independence, you not only improve the quality of life for the people we serve, but you're driving down cost as well. So just by taking responsibility, we can lower cost, improve efficiency in the delivery of services, and with that, provide the relief. And I've done it as a county executive. I will do it as governor. 30% property tax cut over 5 years.
We'll hold you to that.
You will, and I'll be back to prove it.
And why is that? Why people are abandoning New York by the droves?
Yeah, it's not
the governor says the weather.
Yes, it's not the weather, and think about the arrogance that statement comes with. Yes, the governor said that people were leaving New York for the weather. We have the highest tax burden in the country, and because of that, we're strangling businesses, making it difficult for small businesses to survive. Upstate farms and farmers feel disrespected. We're not growing economic opportunity, and because of that, incomes aren't growing. People aren't getting the full-time jobs that they deserve, so they're going someplace else. So New York needs to be more affordable. We need to be more competitive, and we need to support our human infrastructure, help people find their way to greater success. That'll keep New Yorkers here.
Now, for what I read about your campaign, you're running on a concept that Governor Cuomo is the bad guy and you're the good guy, a man of character, good morals, and you're really hitting hard on the governor is corrupt. Let's take a look at one of your campaign spots.
Andrew Cuomo's top advisors are going to jail for stealing your tax dollars. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And now he's under investigation again in another pay-to-play scam. That money should be used for our schools, to fight crime, and put an end to skyrocketing property taxes. It's time for a change.
Time for the change, you say, and how will you change things? I mean, there's been this cloud of corruption. We have legislators. In the last 10 to 15 years, 35 elected officials in this state of New York have been indicted or convicted of corruption.
Even just yesterday and the day before, one of the governor's economic aides or political aides pled guilty to money laundering, in essence, bringing foreign dollars into the governor's campaign account.
There's no evidence that Governor Cuomo directly is involved in any corruption.
Well, there's a couple of points that make sense, right? The governor had a Moreland Commission, which was supposed to root out corruption, and then somehow, out of mystery, he decided to disband it. Well, we know why he disbanded it, because it started to unearth problems within his own administration. He served with his chief of staff, who was making illegal phone calls, trading taxpayer support for campaign resources, campaign donations, in the very office next to him. I mean, either the man's Mr. Magoo or he's not telling the truth. My argument here is simple. After 8 years, we have the most corrupted state government in America, and it has infected Republicans and Democrats. And I will spend every ounce of my political capital, all the years I've served in political office and government office, to leverage the results that New Yorkers deserve. No more pay-to-play, term limits for elected officials, and I will demand up or down votes on it.
We've heard this. I have heard this so many years from politicians all saying they're going to remove that cloud of corruption. And still we have it up there. Specifically, pay-to-play, of course, that's one important thing. To have another Moreland Commission, that's another thing. What else? We hear it all the time from politicians.
Truly independent ethics commission with the ability to enforce the law, empower the attorney general and the district attorneys throughout the state to be able to truly investigate, make sure there's greater accountability and oversight, make sure the independent state comptroller has the ability to provide oversight for dollars being spent. And no more will we take money out of your pockets and give it to businesses that make political contributions. End those things. Demand greater transparency, and you'll start to get more honorable and decent government. And I'll tell you this, you started with the opening, right? After 20 years, we haven't had a Republican governor. I know the honor that I will be granted. And having been a kid who watched government take advantage, having been a kid who stood on social services lines to get food stamps, I know what it's like to be on the outside of the gates looking in. I will have one chance to get this right, and I will do it for New Yorkers.
And also you want to see term limits, I understand.
Yeah, 2 4-year terms for statewide office holders, 6 2-year terms for state legislators, and that's it. Return the power to people. Initiative and referendum. Let voters bring ideas to the polls and let people vote on them, or to force the state legislature to have those conversations. It's about empowering New Yorkers, irregardless of party politics or ideology. Empower New Yorkers to hold the politicians accountable and end the corruption that is stealing from taxpayers every day.
On that note, I'm going to say take a breath. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with the Republican candidate for governor, Marc Molinaro. We'll be right back.
Let us start today by believing we can. Believe we can solve our problems with ideas, not ideology. Believe we can give light to those struggling in darkness. Believe we can rise up and find hope in one another together. And so, let us move forward together and believe again in our state, in our people, and each other.
And here we are with Marc Molinaro, who is running for governor of New York on the Republican ticket. You believe.
I do.
Let me ask you, you believe and you feel confident of victory this time around. But let me ask you this with all due respect. How do you counter the obstacles that are standing in your way? First of all, in a very blue state, being a Republican. Also, many people are saying there's going to be a referendum on President Trump being a Republican. Also, low in finances, low in the polls. How are you going to overcome these obstacles?
Well, first, I wouldn't believe all of that news. I mean, the truth of the matter is we're raising enough money to be effective, and we are. We're communicating to people directly, and we are. And quite frankly, I think the public polls don't necessarily reflect what we see internally. After 8 years, this governor has, and by the way, $26 million he spent during the primary. He still is not, he doesn't have majority support statewide. He's at like 46 or 47% favorability. But that's, I don't like to be a pundit. What you just saw is what I truly believe. I think New Yorkers are tired of politicians who just simply say what they want to hear instead of actually delivering on promises. Now, I've done it every day of my life as a public official, but the way you win is by not believing in the politicians, but believing in yourselves. And so I treat public service, as Bobby Kennedy once suggested, it is a dignified duty. And so I say to New Yorkers very simply that if we want to continue to have a tax and spend government, if you want the transit system not to function, well, then you certainly want the third term of this governor. But we have one chance to get it right, and I believe in the power of New York voters to stand up and speak up and say enough is enough, and ultimately will give us one shot to get this right.
One of the problems we always have, particularly in midterm elections, is getting the voters out, get to the polls.
Yeah.
Now, you have been described as having support among moderate Democrats and independents. You have a libertarian running against you. You have the Green Party and the others. Are they going to siphon votes away? You don't have Cynthia Nixon on the ticket, the Working Family Party. They now have Governor Cuomo on that ticket. They moved her down to assembly spot, and she's like walked away from it all. How is all this going to play?
I think the electorate is pretty volatile and also very smart. And so certainly those other candidates are going to take votes. I mean, people should vote for who they think is best. But at the end of the day, I think as this race gets closer to in November, people are going to realize they have one clear choice. They either have the status quo, the corruption, the spending, the taxation, the broken rail system, and by the way, a system of government that's stealing from taxpayers, or they have a chance to finally have a government and a governor who respects them. Now, I say to voters all the time, we're not going to agree on everything. But what we will agree on is working together to try to get it right. And I believe that that message is powerful in a time and a day where politicians and politics seems to be so angry, so vitriolic. I want us to get this job done for New Yorkers, and I believe that that is a powerful message that ultimately will win the day.
Running for governor on a Republican ticket in a Democratic state which has disdain for our current president. How do you feel that's going to play into it? Do you support the president?
Well, listen, I support policies and ideas, and I support America, and I support being successful. But I call balls and strikes, and I've said this. When the president does or says something that I don't like, I'm going to say it. And I'm going to say it in a way that makes it clear that we mean business. And when he does something that makes sense, investment in infrastructure, if he wants to invest in our cities in New York, I want that to happen too. But what this governor has done is spent the entire part of his campaign making the race about anything other than him. And if New Yorkers want to be misled in that way, we're going to have another 4 years of a broken government. So our message is very simple. There's a reason we term limit presidents to 2 terms. They can consume too much power, and they can take advantage too much. That's what we're facing in Albany. We do not need a governor that continues to ride this broken system into to benefit himself politically. And that's the message that I send to New Yorkers.
Now, nowhere in your campaign, have I noticed anyway, have you mentioned the name Trump. Is that because you consider him a liability?
No, it's because I'm running for governor of the state of New York. And what I caution people about is this. If we want to be about other people, we never truly analyze ourselves. My message is simple. I have a 25-year record of public service, putting people first. I was a Republican for a long time that really is compassionate and dedicated to making the system serve those who are most vulnerable, helping those with disabilities, helping those with mental illness, addressing homelessness. That's my record. I want to be judged on that. Andrew Cuomo should be judged on his record. Taxes are the highest in the nation. The economy is stagnant. We have a broken transit system. You have young people living in NYCHA housing here in the city where there's poisoned water and tainted water and lead paint. That's the record that we ought to be judged on, not on somebody else's rhetoric.
Now, you recently praised the president on his new trade agreement, modernizing the NAFTA agreement, you say, which will be beneficial to New York. How is that?
It will be. It opens up opportunities for New York State farmers, for New York State vineyards and wineries, and for automakers and others. So it's a deal that makes sense for New York. It would have been good if the governor could, from time to time, acknowledge that every so often, when we succeed as a nation, that in fact we are great. I think you recall he said America was never that great. Well, listen, there are moments where I think we should be putting aside politics and celebrate the fact that we are.
Now, you quoted as saying, "We've elected state leaders who don't understand how government is supposed to function." How, in your view, is it supposed to function? How can you make it better?
First of all, government works for the people, not the other way around. This governor seems to think that the people work for the government. But if we're going to take a dollar from you, if we're going to take dollars from taxpayers, we have to make sure that we're effectively getting what we deserve in return. And government doesn't often do that. At my level of government and what I've done, I'm a geek. I'm a government geek. If we are going to set out to solve homelessness, then we need to know what the goal is, we need to know how we're going to get there, and we need to be able to measure success. Instead, we have too many people living in shelters without the assistance they need. We have those dealing with mental illness on our streets. We have those living with drug addiction that aren't getting the help. So it's a matter of setting goals, educating and informing the public, and ensuring that every dollar we commit is effectively spent and we get the return on that investment.
Okay, you hit on the one thing which is a major crisis in the state is the homelessness problem.
Absolutely.
Right here in the city, we know it. How would you eliminate that problem? How would you get these people into affordable housing and out of the shelters?
It's about, I mean, the governor spends too much time playing a game with the mayor. It's about making sure we expand mental health services, that we have addiction services where we need it, where we have support in our shelters, that these are not just places where people come for emergency help, but they come for long-term stability, meaning we have to have mental health providers, we have to have job coaches, we have to have training opportunities, and we need an education system here in New York City and elsewhere that's empowering people to be prepared for job opportunities. And then, by the way, lean on the private sector and create opportunities for those who struggle, who can transition from jail to work, from homelessness to independence. Make that happen, and we create a path from homelessness, from crime, from poverty to greater success. That's how you do it.
Now, a lot of it has to, as governor, you would have to deal with New York City.
Yeah.
You'd have to deal with New York City's mayor, Bill de Blasio. What's your relationship with him? How would you deal with him?
I will work with anybody who is earnest in trying to solve a problem. This governor, I think, wants to be mayor. I want to be governor, and I want to work with Republicans and Democrats and anyone else, the best and the brightest in New York, to help solve problems that face New Yorkers, and I'll do it.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with the Republican gubernatorial candidate, Marc Molinaro. We're back with Marc Molinaro, who is the Republican candidate for governor in the election coming up in just 3 weeks from now. And one of your plans is of something that would resonate with voters here in New York is the MTA, transit system. We have fare increases coming in 2019. We have a fare increase coming in 2021. I think they're talking about a 4% increase.
Sure.
You want to do away?
No fare increases.
Okay.
No fare increases unless and until we get the system accountable. That's number one.
That's always a nice pledge from a politician.
Yeah.
Tell those commuters out, those are harried commuters, how are you going to do that?
We're going to get new leadership at the MTA, leadership that is not entangled in conflicts of interest. We're going to hire the best and the brightest in transportation and transit from around the world. Andy Byford's a good example. Ronnie Hakim is a good example of people who know the system, and make sure that we're making investments in the system to make it work, which means signal switches and subway platforms. It means handicapped accessibility so that everyone of every ability has access. It means car stock. Instead of making and doing these vanity projects. I mean, you had the governor, by the way, in a tunnel, not a subway tunnel, but in tunnel, changing the color of the tiles, costing us millions of dollars. We don't need that. We need to hold the system accountable, demand transparency and savings, and with those savings, invest in the system to make it work. That's what we need to do. Transit is the lifeblood of a city. And this transit system is in a death spiral because Albany and the governor don't want to invest the leadership necessary. And one other thing I'd offer to you, not only no fare hikes, I want to match the City of New York's fair program so that if you make 200% of the poverty level in New York State, that you are able to access transit at no cost, at least while we fix the system, because a broken transit system hurts the most vulnerable the most.
Now, you got a fare increase would raise something like $450 million, which is a drop in the bucket to the $13 billion a year budget.
Yeah.
And there's still this running at a deficit in the MTA.
It's because it's wasteful. It is an inefficient system. We have the most important public authority in the world. There are systems in other countries across the globe that spend more effectively. They protect their employees. They support labor, as I do, but they still are able to get the job done at a lower cost. You cannot ask people to pay more if we're not giving them what they're paying for now.
You've said, in your quote, you say the MTA doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a corruption problem.
does.
Explain.
It does. It does because there's lack of accountability. You saw this. The governor rushed the 2nd Avenue subway open. It didn't even have fire alarms, and they needed to staff people to make sure that the place was safe. We brought in hundreds of new employees to deal with an emergency, and the New York Times reports that they don't even know what in fact their jobs were. I want everybody who works in the system to get a fair pay, but I also want taxpayers to get a fair deal. So we cannot be in a situation where we allow the corruption, the bid rigging, the wasteful spending to steal from commuters and not fix that while asking them for more money. So it's a matter of making sure we spend smartly to make the investment. A mile of rail line in New York costs 5 or 6 times more than any place else in the world. Wring out those savings so we're not cheating taxpayers and commuters, and use that savings to support the workers and to invest in the system.
Now, I know you're leaving from here to a press conference because you've been harping on this and really digging into the governor about the release of felons and putting them on parole. But the parole board is independent. It isn't the word of the governor that's getting these people released.
Well, first, there is no entity in Andrew Cuomo's Albany that is independent of the governor, and most of those of the parole board members are appointed by the governor, and he could make perfectly clear or move legislation that would make it perfectly clear if you kill a cop, you are not eligible for parole. That's my belief.
And what are you saying that's new at this press conference today?
Well, the parole board is hearing a case for an individual who tortured and murdered a police officer here in New York City, 2 police officers here in New York City. The governor not only allowed this one individual to be paroled, but he actually pardoned him, giving him the right to vote. I'm sorry, there are certain things that are black and white. There are certain things that are right and wrong. If you kill a police officer, you should not be eligible for parole, and you certainly should not be pardoned as the governor provided. At the end of the day, there needs to be some protection for our citizens, and those men and women who sacrifice the most deserve that respect, that protection, and that assurance. And this is the same governor who called federal enforcement officers thugs. At the end of the day, we need to be careful about our language, and we need to be certain that we protect those who protect us.
We're talking about crises in New York, and as governor, you would have to deal with this. How would you deal with the opioid crisis?
That's a good one. It's a public health crisis of our lifetime, and we're losing people. First, acknowledging it. First, saying you cannot afford to be an innocent bystander. There are people in our lives who are struggling that need help. We have to speak up. But as a government, we need to give resources: mental health assistance, medicated assisted treatment, crisis intervention, stabilization and recovery assistance, all of that in a comprehensive response, as we do in my county. In fact, New York City sent staff up to Dutchess to see how we do it. So we need a comprehensive approach. And by the way, that means the city has to invest in the areas they're effective. The state has to support. We need to do this together because we're losing too many people.
How about the legalization of recreational marijuana?
Yeah, I don't embrace that. I think first we need to make sure that those who have medical illnesses that could benefit from medical marijuana use should have access. New York's done a horrible job in that regard. I'm all for expanding access for medical purposes. I know and trust, in fact, the city is probably going to move forward with something on its own. I think there's still some questions that need to be answered. I believe in decriminalization. Nobody should be in jail. Nobody should be in jail because of a marijuana issue.
I have to ask you this, with all due respect, in the political climate and the social climate, the cultural climate these days, any skeletons in your closet?
None that I'm aware of. I always joke I started so young. I don't have any skeletons. I don't even have a closet.
18.
It was my mom's closet, you know. Listen, I'm not perfect, and I don't pretend to be, but I tell people this. We ought to have elected officials who try to do better. So anytime I've made a mistake, I acknowledge it and try to fix it. It'd be nice if more people like that in politics treated things that way.
You know, that's what I love about this program. We have an opportunity, a forum to hear your views. We have invited Governor Cuomo on this program several times. He has not responded to our invitation. The invitation still holds, Governor Cuomo, anytime you wish to come aboard. Anyway, anything I haven't covered in here you'd like to take the last 30 seconds and pitch to the viewers?
Well, I just say this. I truly believe in the power of people when they stand up and speak up to hold politicians and government accountable, and that we have problems that are really facing the people of the state of New York, and ultimately together we can solve them.
Okay, Marc Molinaro, best of luck to you, the Republican candidate for the governor of New York. Best of luck. Thank you for joining us. And that'll do it for our program this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this program again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.